I stood by my mother's grave while my family was already busy dividing what she left behind, except none of it was meant for me. Losing my mother was a pain I never imagined I would carry. It wasn't just that she died, it was the way it happened, how fast life could collapse in the blink of an eye. It was a Wednesday morning, the kind of ordinary day where you think the worst thing that can happen is spilling your coffee on your shirt. I was halfway through sorting paperwork at my office when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Miss Cooper, I'm calling from Mercy General Hospital. I'm sorry. There's been an accident." My mother had been hit by a drunk driver on her way to pick up groceries. She died at the scene. Just like that, she was gone. I remember the way my legs gave out. I remember the cold tile floor against my knees. I remember the way the world suddenly went quiet, like someone had turned down the volume of life itself. I couldn't process it. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there in that sterile office, my heart pounding in my ears, trying to make sense of the words that felt too cruel to be real. I called my father first. He picked up after the third ring, his voice as calm as if I had called to confirm dinner plans. "She's gone," I choked out. "Mom's gone. The hospital. They just called me." There was a pause, just long enough to make me hope he would say something to comfort me, to remind me I wasn't alone. "We'll need to contact the estate lawyer," he said flatly. "I'll handle it." "No, I'm so sorry." "No, how are you holding up? Just business." That was my father. Always practical. Always distant. I should have expected it. But somehow it still broke something inside me. I rushed to the hospital anyway, even though they told me there was nothing more to do. I needed to see her to say goodbye. I needed to prove to myself that this nightmare wasn't just a phone call. When I arrived, they led me to a small, sterile room. My mother lay on the bed, her face pale but peaceful. I reached out and touched her hand. It was still warm. I remember whispering, "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." But I was too late. That night, I called my brother Daniel. He lived 3 hours away but said he wouldn't be able to come until the weekend. "Work's crazy this week," he said. "But Dad's handling the will, right? He's on top of all that." His voice was casual, distant, as if he were talking about renewing a gym membership, not the death of our mother. I felt like I was grieving alone. The funeral came and went like a blur. I organized most of it by myself. I picked the flowers she loved, white lilies. I chose the hymn she used to hum while cooking Amazing Grace. I gave the eulogy because no one else volunteered. Standing there looking out at the sea of solemn faces, I realized something brutal. My family wasn't broken by this loss. Only I was. I thought maybe grief looked different on everyone. Maybe they were hurting in ways I couldn't see. I told myself to be patient. But that hope shattered the day I overheard them, my father and my brother, whispering at the gravesite just minutes after we lowered her into the ground. "Let's get the paperwork filed quickly," my father muttered. "We should get this settled before Natalie starts asking questions." The words sliced through me like a blade. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I wasn't supposed to know. But I did. The next day, when I asked about the will, my father told me everything had already been handled. "Your mother left everything to Daniel," he said without flinching. "The house, the savings, the lake cabin. It's all his now." I stared at him in disbelief. "What? That doesn't make sense. She would have told me. I took care of her. I was there." "She must have changed her mind," he said coldly. "Maybe she knew you'd be fine on your own. But I knew my mother. We were close. I was her emergency contact. I was the one who sat by her hospital bed when she had pneumonia. I was the one who picked up her medication, who made her doctor's appointments, who spent every Thanksgiving at her side when Daniel couldn't be bothered to show up. She would never have done this, not willingly. But in that moment, they closed the door on me. Family is supposed to pull you in when life falls apart. Mine had just pushed me out. I walked away from that conversation in a haze of betrayal, grief twisting in my chest, a seed of doubt already beginning to grow. What if they weren't telling me the whole story? What if my mother had tried to protect me in a way I hadn't yet discovered? What if this wasn't over? I wanted to believe there had been some mistake, some misunderstanding. I told myself that grief made people act strangely, that maybe my father was just overwhelmed, and maybe my brother didn't understand the weight of what had happened. I needed answers. I needed to hear from them directly why they had erased me from my own mother's legacy. So I drove to my childhood home, the place where family was supposed to feel safe. It didn't. The house looked the same, paint chipping on the front steps, the American flag still waving lazily from the porch. But it felt smaller, colder, like I had somehow outgrown it overnight. I found my father in the den scrolling through his iPad like nothing had changed. Daniel sat nearby, flipping through a sports magazine as if we weren't living in the aftermath of the most defining moment of our lives. "I need to talk to both of you," I said, my voice shaking, though I hated that they could hear it. My father barely looked up. "If this is about the will, Natalie, it's already settled." I pressed on. "I don't understand. Mom and we were close. She wouldn't have left me with nothing." Daniel shrugged like the whole thing was a minor inconvenience. "She probably thought I needed it more." "Needed it more?" I repeated, stunned. "You make 6 figures. You have a house, a family, a boat. I've been renting the same apartment for 5 years, working overtime to cover medical bills when Mom was sick." My father finally set his tablet down. "You've always been emotional, Natalie. That's why you can't see the big picture." I stared at him, confused. "What does that have to do with anything? You've never been good with money." He continued, his voice calm, as if he were explaining basic math to a child. "You spent your 20s chasing dreams, moving from job to job. Daniel's stable, responsible. He's better equipped to manage the assets. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So you think I would have wasted it?" "We're not saying that." But that's exactly what they were saying. "We're saying, your brother is the safe choice." Safe. As if love, loyalty, and years of caregiving meant nothing compared to spreadsheets and bank accounts. "You know what I remember?" I said, my voice tightening with the weight of years of quiet resentment. "I remember birthdays where you didn't show up. I remember holidays where Mom and I sat at the table alone because Daniel couldn't make it. I remember every phone call she made to you, every voicemail you ignored." "That's not fair," Daniel started, but I cut him off. "No, what's not fair is you pretending like you were the perfect son when you were barely around. I was there, Dad. I was the one who took care of her. I was the one who stayed." My father sighed like he was tired of this conversation. "Look, Natalie, we're not here to debate feelings. The decision was made. Your mother's wishes were clear." But something deep inside me whispered that wasn't true. My mother would have told me. She would have explained. She would have left something, anything. She wouldn't have just disappeared from my life without a final word. And yet they were so quick to push me aside, so confident that I wouldn't question it, so comfortable dismissing me as the emotional daughter who couldn't handle responsibility. Family in America is supposed to be your safety net, your home base. But what happens when that home becomes the very thing that betrays you? I looked at my father and brother and realized they weren't grieving. They were moving on. For them, this was just paperwork, just assets to be split and claimed. For me, it was the loss of the person who knew me best in the world. And now I was expected to simply accept their version of the story. I was supposed to walk away quietly like the good daughter they'd always assumed I would be. But that's the thing about people like me, the ones you label as emotional, too soft, too sensitive. We notice everything, we remember. And when we finally stand up, we do it with a quiet strength that no one sees coming. I left that house with more than just grief. I left with purpose. They thought I would just let this go. They were wrong. I didn't leave quietly because I had given up. I left quietly because I needed to think. That day, walking out of my childhood home, I felt a fire building inside me, a fire I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't angry for the sake of revenge. I was angry because the people I was supposed to trust had dismissed me, like I didn't matter. And the more I replayed their words in my head, their cold justifications, their casual dismissal, the more I knew something wasn't right. I've always been the emotional one, The one who cried at commercials, the one who kept every birthday card, the one who remembered the little things. But being emotional isn't the same as being weak. That's where they underestimated me. Grief has a strange way of making everything crystal clear. I couldn't bring my mother back, but I could find the truth. The next day, I started with her house. It was still mostly untouched since the funeral. The smell of her lavender candles lingered in the air. Her favorite sweater still hung on the back of her chair in the living room. I moved through each room carefully like I was walking through a sacred space. Every picture frame, every notebook, every sticky note on the fridge felt like a breadcrumb she left behind, guiding me somewhere I hadn't yet reached. When I got to her study, I sat in her chair and stared at the desk where she used to write. She had always been meticulous, every document labeled, every bill filed, every journal tucked neatly away. But one drawer in the desk wouldn't open. It was locked. The key wasn't in the usual place. I checked every kitchen drawer, every coat pocket, even the box of spare keys by the front door. Nothing. Until I remembered the worn leather jewelry box she always kept in her closet. I used to play with it as a kid. Inside, beneath her old charm bracelets, I found a tiny brass key. I held my breath as I turned the lock. The drawer slid open with a soft click, revealing a stack of letters, legal documents, and something that stopped me cold, a file folder with my name on it, written in her handwriting. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling Inside was a letter dated just 3 months before her death. "My dearest Natalie," it began. "I know your father and brother think they know best, but I trust you. I've always trusted you. I've made arrangements to ensure you are taken care of, even if they try to shut you out. Please contact Richard Samuels at Samuels & Klein Law Firm. He's been helping me with a separate trust that is yours alone. I know you would never ask for anything, but you've given me everything: your time, your patience, your love. This is the least I can do to make sure you're okay." I read the letter over and over, tears slipping down my cheeks, a mix of heartbreak and relief. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't overlooked. She knew. She saw what was coming. She tried to protect me the only way she could. I found the contact card for Richard Samuels tucked into the folder. His number was still active. When I called his office the next morning, he remembered my mother immediately. She was very specific about her wishes, he told me. "There's a trust in your name. It's secure, and no one else has access to it. She wanted you to have independent security, everything she believed you deserved. Everything my father and brother tried to take from me." The trust wasn't just money. It included the deed to a small lake cabin, one of my mother's favorite places. The place where we used to watch sunsets and talk about life. It wasn't grand or expensive, but it was ours. She had made sure it would always be mine. I felt something shift in me that day. For the first time since she died, I felt like I could breathe again. Like I had something solid to hold on to in a sea of betrayal. They thought I would walk away empty-handed. They thought they had erased me from the story. But they were wrong. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their version of the truth. I had my mother's words, her trust, her quiet rebellion. And now I had a choice. I could disappear from their lives forever, or I could face them with the truth in hand and the strength they never believed I had. I knew what I needed to do, and I wasn't afraid. When I drove to the Samuels & Klein Law Firm later that week, I was still gripping my mother's letter in my hand like it was a lifeline. Part of me was afraid it wouldn't be real, that maybe I had misunderstood, that maybe I'd show up and there would be nothing. But something inside me told me to trust her the same way she had trusted me. The building was small and unassuming, tucked between a hardware store and a local coffee shop. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to hold life-changing secrets, but that's exactly what it did for me. Richard Samuels was a man in his early 60s with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a voice that instantly reminded me of those rare people who actually listen when you speak. When I sat down in his office, he reached for a familiar blue folder. "Your mother was very deliberate," he said, sliding the folder toward me. "She made it clear that this trust was to remain confidential until you came to me. She anticipated Complications with the rest of your family. Complications. That was a polite way to describe the storm I'd been caught in. He took his time explaining the documents. My mother had set up a separate trust fund in my name, untouchable by anyone else. It wasn't just about money, though the assets were substantial enough to provide stability for years. It was about security, about freedom. And more than that, she left me something that meant even more than the trust itself, a handwritten letter sealed in an envelope with my name on it. My sweet Natalie. It began. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you these things in person. I wish I had more time with you. I wish I could have told you this over tea with your favorite chocolate cake, but sometimes life moves faster than our hearts can follow. I swallowed hard, tears already blurring the page. Your father and brother may try to convince you that you don't deserve this, but you do. Not because of money, not because of inheritance, because you have always been the one who stayed. You loved me without conditions. You showed up when no one else did. I knew they would fight over what I left behind. I knew they would try to corner you to make you feel small. That's why I made sure there was something they could never touch. Something that's yours. I want you to build a life that isn't controlled by their guilt or their approval. I want you to go to the lake house and watch the sunsets. I want you to feel free. I don't remember how long I sat in Richard's office clutching that letter, reading it over and over. It felt like my mother was sitting right beside me, telling me to hold my head high, telling me she had my back even from beyond this life. When I finally looked up, Richard gave me a soft smile. Your mother loved you deeply, Natalie. She wanted you to know that this trust isn't a handout. It's her way of making sure you always have the power to choose. That word choice stuck with me. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to let my father and brother define the next chapter of my life. I didn't have to accept their version of what family meant. My mother had given me more than financial security. She had given me agency. She had given me the freedom to walk away or to fight if I chose to. And I knew deep in my bones that I wouldn't stay silent. Not this time. I left the law office with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd erased me. But my mother had written me back into the story, and I intended to finish it. I thought the silence would last longer. After I left the law office, after I fully understood what my mother had protected for me, I expected at least a few weeks before the next confrontation. But people like my father and brother, they don't wait. They don't like loose ends. 3 days later, my phone started buzzing. At first, it was just text messages. We need to talk. Let's settle this like family. Natalie, you're being unreasonable. This isn't what Mom would have wanted. I ignored them. But when ignoring didn't work, they escalated. My brother Daniel showed up at my apartment unannounced, leaning casually against his truck like he owned the world. Natalie, he said when I opened the door, his tone infuriatingly smooth, like we were old friends instead of siblings on opposite sides of a battlefield. Come on, let's talk. Let's be civil about this. I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway blocking his path. There's nothing to discuss, Daniel. He smiled, a fake, practiced smile I'd seen him use on clients when he worked in real estate. Dad and I are just trying to look out for the family. You can't keep all that for yourself. It's selfish. The word hit me hard. Selfish. Was it selfish to hold on to what my mother had deliberately left for me? Was it selfish to protect the one thing no one else could control? The guilt flared up in me like it always did when my family pushed the right buttons. But then I remembered her letter. I remembered her writing. They will try to make you feel small. I straightened my shoulders. It's not yours to take. And Mom knew that. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low as if rehearsed. You really think this is what she wanted? To break the family apart over some paperwork? You really think she'd want you to keep that house, that money, all to yourself? She made a trust in my name. She chose that. You can keep pretending she didn't. But the truth doesn't change. His eyes flickered with something sharp, anger, frustration, maybe panic. He wasn't used to me standing my ground. Before he left, he said something that stuck with me for days. Family takes care of each other, Natalie. You'll regret turning your back on us. It was a threat wrapped in fake concern. When Daniel realized I wasn't going to fold, my father took the next step. He called every extended family member he could, spinning the story in his favor. Suddenly, I was the one being painted as greedy, ungrateful, cold. My Aunt Marjorie left me a voicemail that broke my heart. "Natalie, sweetie, I don't understand why you're doing this. Your father said you're trying to cut everyone out. That's not how we handle things in this family." But what family? The one that pretended I didn't exist when it suited them. The one that thought love could be measured in dollar signs and legal documents. The pressure was relentless. They sent emails. They showed up at my job. My father even cornered me at the grocery store one evening, right in the frozen foods aisle. "Natalie, enough," he said sharply. "Let's end this embarrassment. I've already spoken to the estate lawyer. We can draft an agreement that makes everyone happy." Everyone but me, I thought. They're your assets, but they belong to the family. You have a duty to share. I looked at him, this man who raised me, who taught me how to ride a bike, who once kissed my scraped knees, and I felt nothing but distance. "You didn't care about the family when Mom was alive," I said quietly. "You didn't show up when she needed you. Don't talk to me about duty." His face hardened, his hand tightening around the shopping cart handle. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You made the mistake when you thought I'd just hand it all over." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of losing control. That's what this was always about, control. They didn't love me less because I was emotional. They feared me less because they thought I would never fight back. But now I was fighting, and I wasn't backing down. I knew the time had come. They weren't going to stop. The calls, the texts, the carefully orchestrated attacks from relatives, they were all part of a coordinated effort to wear me down. My father and brother thought they could drown me in guilt, that if they pushed hard enough, I would eventually fold like I always did. But I wasn't the same Natalie they had spent years dismissing. I was done hiding. So I made the decision to face them on my terms. I called my father first. I told him we needed to have a family meeting. I could almost hear the satisfaction in his voice when he agreed, like he believed I was finally coming to my senses. But I wasn't coming to apologize. I was coming to end it. The following Sunday, I walked into the same house I had grown up in, the house that now felt more like enemy territory than a home. My father was waiting in the living room, sitting tall in his leather recliner like a judge ready to deliver a sentence. Daniel leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, wearing that same smug grin that made me want to scream. Several of our aunts and uncles were there too, family members who had been fed half-truths and one-sided stories, most of them looking at me with quiet judgment. I sat down across from my father, my mother's letter folded carefully in my jacket pocket, my hands resting firmly in my lap. "Well," my father began, "I'm glad you're here. It's about time we handle this properly." His tone was transactional, cold, like we were about to finalize a business deal. He gestured to a pile of papers on the coffee table. "We've put together a proposal that benefits everyone. You can keep a portion of the trust, but the majority should be shared. It's only fair." Fair? That word made my blood boil. Before I could speak, Daniel jumped in. "Come on, Natalie. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You know Mom wouldn't have wanted the family torn apart over money." His fake sincerity was almost laughable. I took a breath, steadying my voice. "You mean the money you didn't even know existed until I found it? The trust you both tried to hide from me?" Silence fell over the room. Daniel's jaw twitched, but he stayed quiet. "I found Mom's letter," I continued, my voice rising. "She knew you would try to push me out. She knew you would say things like, 'Do the right thing,' and 'Think about the family.' That's why she protected me." I pulled the letter from my pocket and laid it on the table for everyone to see. "She left this for me. Not for you. Not for some family negotiation. For me. Because I was the one who stayed. I was the one who cared." Their faces shifted. My father's stone-cold glare cracked for a second. Daniel's confidence faltered. "You call me selfish," I said, my voice trembling, not from fear but from years of words I had swallowed. But what's selfish is thinking you could erase me from her life and still expect me to hand over what she left for me. My father leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. Natalie, don't be emotional about this. Let's be rational. There it is again, I said bitterly. You always use that word to keep me small. Emotional. Like it's a flaw. I stood up, my heart pounding but my feet steady. Being emotional is why I stayed when you didn't. It's why I held her hand when she was sick. It's why she trusted me with her final wishes. I looked at the faces in the room, some ashamed, some still skeptical. But I didn't care. This wasn't about winning their approval. This was about standing up for myself. I'm not here to negotiate, I said firmly. I'm here to tell you this conversation is over. Daniel's voice broke through the silence. You can't just cut us out. I'm not cutting you out, I said, grabbing my bag. You did that when you decided what I deserved. I turned toward the door, but not before leaving them with the one truth they couldn't argue. You didn't lose the trust fund that day. You lost me. And with that, I walked away, not just from the house, but from the grip they thought they had on my life. I didn't need their permission. I didn't need their acceptance. I finally knew I was enough without them. I walked out of that house with my heart pounding in my chest, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear, it was from freedom. The weight of their expectations, their manipulation, their false version of family, it all stayed behind in that living room where they sat in silence, still trying to figure out how they lost control. I didn't look back. When I reached my car, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The air outside felt lighter, crisper, like I had finally stepped out of a storm. But what comes after you walk away from the people who raised you, that's the part no one tells you about. Cutting ties, setting boundaries. That's the first battle. The second battle is building something new, deciding what family really means when the blood ties no longer feel safe. For days, the silence in my apartment was deafening. I didn't have anyone waiting to celebrate with me. There was no victory party, no applause for the girl who finally stood up for herself. Just me, my mother's letter, and the quiet ache of knowing that I had to rebuild from scratch. It would have been easy to slip into loneliness, to feel like I had lost everything. But the truth is, I had only lost what was already broken. And what I still had, what I could build, mattered more. It started with a phone call I almost didn't make. My mother's best friend Linda had been part of our lives for decades. She had been like an aunt to me, though distance and family drama had made our connection fade over the years. I hesitated before dialing her number, unsure if I even had the right to reach out after all this time. But when she picked up, her voice was warm, steady, exactly as I remembered. Natalie, she said softly, I was hoping you'd call. We met for coffee the next day, and when I told her everything, the trust, the confrontation, the years I'd spent being the emotional outsider, she didn't look at me with judgment or pity. She just nodded, like it all made sense. Your mother told me once, Linda said, wrapping her hands around her mug, that if things ever turned bad with your father and Daniel, she hoped you'd find your own family, the one you choose. That sentence stayed with me. Your own family, the one you choose. Linda became that for me. Not out of obligation, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She called me regularly, brought over dinner when she knew I'd been working late, and shared stories about my mother I had never heard before. And then there was Ava, my cousin, someone I hadn't really known well growing up. She'd been kept at a distance from our side of the family, partly by geography, partly by the way my father controlled the family narrative. When Ava heard what happened, she called me out of the blue. I always knew they treated you unfairly, she said. You don't have to go through this alone. Ava became my sounding board, my partner in rebuilding what family could look like. She didn't come with guilt trips or expectations. She came with empathy, with an understanding of what it feels like to be the outsider. With them, Linda, Ava, I found something I hadn't even realized I was missing: peace. No one was keeping score. No one was leveraging love for power. It was simple. It was real. Over time, I stopped thinking of family as a fixed thing. I stopped believing that blood meant loyalty. Family is who shows up. Family is who listens. Family is who stands beside you not because they expect something in return, but because they want to. And as I leaned into those relationships, the bitterness I had carried for so long began to soften. I stopped needing to prove anything to my father or Daniel. I stopped checking my phone waiting for their next guilt trip or threat. They faded from my life like a bad storm clearing the sky. I started spending weekends at the lake house, the one my mother made sure would be mine. I'd sit on the old wooden dock with a book in hand, and the sun warming my shoulders, feeling a peace I didn't think I would ever get back. Linda joined me sometimes, bringing sandwiches and folding chairs. Ava came too sometimes with her own family, and we built new traditions, small ones, but ours. I had lost something, yes, but I gained something far more. After the confrontation, after I walked out and chose myself over their version of family, they made a few attempts to pull me back. A voicemail here, a distant text there, always coded in carefully chosen words like "let's find a solution" or "it's still not too late to fix this." But I didn't respond. I didn't owe them a response. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't have to defend who I was. I didn't have to chase their approval like I had done my entire life. Instead, I started focusing on what I wanted to build for myself. I spent more weekends at the lake house. It became my refuge, a place where I could hear my own thoughts without the weight of their voices in the background. I'd sit on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the way the sunlight glittered across the water. My mother loved that view. She used to say the lake always knew how to hold a secret. Maybe that's why she protected it from me. The more time I spent there, the more I realized I wanted to do something that wasn't just about surviving. I wanted to create something in her name. That's when I decided to turn the lake house into a community retreat. A place for women who, like me, had been through family betrayal, grief, or emotional trauma. A place where they could come, unplug, heal, and maybe even rediscover themselves. I used a portion of the trust not because I needed permission, but because it felt right. It felt like what my mother would have wanted for the legacy she left to become something bigger than just financial security. I called it the Cooper Haven. The first time I put up the wooden sign at the entrance, my hands trembled not with fear, but with the weight of knowing I had built something from the ashes of everything they tried to take. Women came. Women with stories that mirrored my own. They came from cities, from small towns, from places I'd never heard of. They sat in the chairs I set out on the porch, walked along the dock I had once walked with my mother, and cried in the rooms I had repainted with soft, calming colors. I wasn't just healing, I was helping others heal. And somewhere along the way, I realized that I no longer thought about my father or Daniel with rage. I thought about them with distance. They no longer held space in my heart. I didn't hate them. I simply didn't carry them with me anymore. Their absence was no longer painful, it was necessary. I found comfort in the family I chose. Linda became like a second mother, always dropping by with homemade muffins and stories that made me laugh on the hardest days. Ava and I became more like sisters than cousins. She helped me organize events at the Haven and showed up without being asked, not because she had something to prove, but because that's what real family does. We built new holidays, new traditions. Thanksgiving wasn't about sitting at a long table filled with forced conversations. It was about bonfires by the lake, sharing stories with people who had earned the right to be there. On the 1-year anniversary of the confrontation, I received a letter from my father, handwritten. I hesitated before opening it. In it, he said he regretted how things had unfolded, that maybe he had let money blind him, that maybe he had misunderstood what family really meant. But I didn't need the apology. Sometimes apologies come too late, not because people can't change, but because you've already changed without them. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Instead, I chose to keep building, keep healing, keep choosing the life that aligned with my peace. The biggest lesson I learned is that family isn't about bloodlines. It's about who shows up when it matters, who listens, who loves you without asking what's in it for them. The trust fund they wanted to steal, I used it to invest in my future, not to hoard or to hurt, but to grow. The inheritance they thought would buy their control, It bought me freedom. And the girl they thought was too emotional to fight back. She built something they could never touch. I built a life they couldn't erase. And that I realized was the best kind of revenge. Not revenge fueled by anger, but revenge built with purpose, peace, and a love that was finally my own. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's this. You get to choose who's allowed to stay in your life. I used to think family was something you had to accept, no matter how they treated you. I believed that sharing the same blood meant I had to tolerate disrespect, manipulation, and silence in the moments when I needed them most. But I've learned that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up for you, who listens when you speak, and who loves you without keeping score. For years, I made myself small to keep the peace. I let their opinions shape my worth, and I believed I had to earn my place at their table. I thought being emotional was a weakness. I thought setting boundaries was selfish. I don't believe that anymore. Choosing myself wasn't selfish. Protecting the life my mother wanted for me wasn't cruel. Saying no to guilt and yes to peace wasn't betrayal. It was survival. If you've ever felt trapped in a relationship where love comes with conditions, where loyalty feels one-sided, or where your worth is measured in how much you can give, it's okay to step back. It's okay to walk away. You don't have to explain yourself to people who never really listened. The best revenge isn't payback. It's building a life. They can't touch a life where your happiness isn't tied to their approval. I chose my own peace, my own people, and my own purpose. And I've realized the door you close on toxic people is the same door that opens to a family you get to build. Don't be afraid to close that door. You deserve what's on the other side.